Hi, welcome to Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Robert Green, and joining me today is Jerry Nixon. Hello, Jerry.
Hiya, Robert. Glad to be here. Finally, we've tried to schedule
Finally.
this so many times, and finally we made the
This is
connection.
a very special
Every time
episode
I watch
because
every one of your episodes, by the way, and I'm so
awesome.
jealous every time you're doing it. I'm like, I want to be on that.
Oh, stop. Jerry and I have been trying to do this for months, possibly longer, and we're finally, our schedules and have matched. The fates have aligned, and
Finally.
you are on the show. This is awesome. We're going to talk about the Data API Builder today, and
We are.
you're going to tell us what is it, why is it, what does it do, what can we do with it, why should we care, all of those questions.
Okay. I think I got all of those down. No problem. It's
But before we
beautiful.
dive in, why don't you introduce yourself to the viewers who may or may not know you?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. My name is Jerry Nixon, and I've been talking to Microsoft developers for a long time now. This is I'm right around 14 years at Microsoft now. I
Mm-hmm.
started as a developer evangelist, and so the big part of my career at Microsoft, at least, 8 of those years, was teaching developers, being able to kind of find where all the friction points were and help them kind of smooth those out and understand how our services and products can kind of fit together. So it's always been fun like that. And I'm a professor here now in Denver. I work at Colorado Christian University, and
Mm-hmm.
as well as I'm a proctor for a course at Cornell. So it's nice because I still have this teaching bug, right? I love this thing where I get to take complex things and kind of break them down and decompose them to make them easy to understand. And so that's really nice because now I moved over to the SQL Server team, which has always been sort of my second love, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's all been .NET, it's all been Visual Studio, of course, and SQL Server. Those three things, frankly, have paid my mortgage most of my life. And so I've just had this kind of love affair with them. Done so much with .NET. It's pretty cool now to be over on the SQL side, where I thought I knew so much about SQL Server. Rob, now I know barely anything about SQL. There's so much to this. It's
That is
incredible. It's
true.
absolutely incredible. Data API Builder, though, is a tool it's a free open source tool that we built that sits on top of SQL Server, as well as Postgres, as well as Cosmos DB and MySQL. And really, it's just meant to make it really easy to build a data API over your database. A lot of our customers, especially the big ones, have internal rules now that require that nobody can access their database directly anymore. They have to always go through an API. So they have to build this
Okay.
regardless of what their line of business systems and apps are. And so just dropping this in basically it's not low code. It's not it's not code gen. It's zero code. It is simply an engine that sits inside a
Oh,
container, and you provide it with a JSON document that describes your database. The end. It's an amazing tool, man. It's crazy. A lot of things are smoke and mirrors, and you just kind of squint and you say whatever you need to say. This is not that. It is really cool. Like, it is really. I can't wait to show it to you, to be honest.
I'd like to see it. I have a ton of questions, but before I get to any of them, why don't you show it to us and let's see what it looks like.
Okay, so let's start with how we have this adorable logo,
Mm-hmm.
as all projects must have. But let me just explain it like conceptually for anybody who may not like be there. If you have a normal application that's multi-tiered, you probably have an API in the middle, and
Yep.
the API really, I would say 90% of the time, is really just CRUD operations, that create, read,
Yes.
update, and delete operation that you would go against a database. And you're writing the same code over and over again. It's super repetitive to the point where you probably go back to an old project, copy the code you did there, and drop it in here. And all you really do is start introducing opportunities for error and a lot of nonsense, repetitive, boring code that is not very great. No, the code's great, but not very great to have to maintain. And so it also means that now I have repositories to write. I have Entity Framework that maybe I need to upgrade to something. Now I also have unit tests, and my CI/CD pipeline is going to have this extra set of steps. So if I could take all of that and just remove it, that's the vision of Data API Builder, right? So if you think about that, that translation to the database, let's just focus on SQL Server for a second. It's all T-SQL, but interacting with your API is all HTTP and JSON, nothing else. So it doesn't. So if you're a .NET developer, this works for you. If you're if you're a JavaScript developer, this works for you. Python, Java, but whatever it is you write, it
Hmm.
doesn't matter because it's just an API. It's you don't have to install a library. You don't have to. There's nothing, and there's no cost to it. There's no hidden anything. There's no premium tier. It doesn't only work in Azure. It also works on-prem. You could load it on GCP. You could load it on AWS. We don't really care. It's just meant to be an API layer that is consistent and written the way you would do it without any bunch of exotic nonsense that we threw in because we can. It's open source. You can look at the code. We wrote it the way you would write it. The only thing we did special was we made it so it's dynamic, so that you can use this JavaScript file. This JSON file instead of having to code anything. It's pretty neat, man.
Wow.
It's something else. Yeah, and I mean it's lightning fast. Wait, I mean it is so nice.
All
It's
right.
really cool.
Prove
All
it.
right, so that's the
Prove
last
it.
slide that I want to show you,
Those are
and
some those are some big promises there, my friend.
they are. All right, I'll show you one more slide just because I want to make this point real quick. There are three things that are built into it that are good for developers. The first is we have OpenAPI. So OpenAPI is a big deal. As you know, there's a transition away from Swagger right now and a transition to OpenAPI and letting OpenAPI do all the work for us. And so
Okay.
we already have that built in. So OpenAPI is an endpoint that you naturally get if you're using our REST endpoints. We are both REST endpoints and GraphQL at the same time, so you don't have to pick between the two. You can turn one or the other off if you want to, but you don't have to.
GraphQL. What's GraphQL?
So REST is that HTTP get, put, post, patch sort of thing where
Yeah.
a lot of us have already done that.
Mhm.
GraphQL also is HTTP endpoint where you're using get, put, and post, except for there's a language, a GraphQL language that you include in the body. And that language is basically a query, and you're asking for a certain set of data. So where a REST endpoint, there's never one, where there's many REST endpoints for all the things. So you have your employees and your invoices and your inventory, and all of those would have different REST endpoints. GraphQL has one, just a GraphQL endpoint, and it gives you back the data that you query for. So it allows you to have this query language translated then into like a T-SQL query against SQL, or a SQL query against Postgres, or a NoSQL query against Cosmos. It's insane, all the different things we
Okay.
support. But GraphQL just makes it happen, and it's really nice. It's gaining a lot of traction, especially in professional circles where they realize that they're going to need to be able to maintain like an endpoint for a mobile application that changes a lot, but they don't want to be able to. They don't want to be forced to change the endpoint all the time. So because you can pass this query, it allows the endpoint to be super dynamic. It's really nice. Yeah,
Okay.
really nice.
Cool.
So we have OpenAPI and Swagger, and then we also have a it's gonna sound like I'm making it up, but I'm not. Banana Cake Pop. That's the Swagger is for
Okay.
REST. Banana Cake Pop is for GraphQL. It's just meant for developers to
Okay.
be able to interact with the backend system. All right,
Got it.
I was telling you the truth. All right, I just exited PowerPoint here. There are so many things I want to show you around what architectural support and stuff it does, but I also want to get to the demo because this is the best part of the whole thing. I this is let me do some control minuses just to make this quick little point. This is all there is. Look how small the code is. Like this is what the JSON looks like when you're describing your database. There's three main sections. The first is how you connect to the database. So in my case, it's going to be MSSQL as the database type. And then I have a environment variable, and this is the normal way to interact with it. I have an environment variable called my connection string. That's where my connection string is stored. And then I pass the session state, but don't pay attention to that. That's just advanced capabilities that we have. Then the runtime itself, I can enable and disable REST, sort of like what I was saying before, except for I can decide where that endpoint is going to begin. So /API is pretty common for REST. That's also our default. Same thing with GraphQL. We can say that GraphQL is going to be the endpoint, but maybe you want it to be in a different place. Allow introspection, by the way, and both of these have additional features that I'm kind of hinting at, but allow introspection allows you to see the schema that is supported by the GraphQL endpoint, which is really cool because it gives developers building a client kind of an IntelliSense experience when they're interacting and building out their query. It's super cool. I'll show you that in just a second because it's a really neat experience. We have we no longer support Active Directory. We only support Intra ID now that Active Directory has changed its name to Intra ID. We also support every custom JOT server that you can imagine. We support static web apps, which is basically easy auth and is that it? Yeah, and that's it. Those are the three big ones. And so with Intra or Intra, how do you say it, Rob? Intra ID or Intra? Intra. So with Intra ID, I'm going to say it your way. That is everything in the Microsoft world, no doubt about it. But if you're outside of the Microsoft world, you may have some other exotic OAuth provider that you're using. No big deal. That's the reason we support standard JOT tokens as well. So you can have that either inside your solution where you're provisioning a token and signing it, or outside of your solution. Either way, we take it, read the claims, and then pass those claims on forward through your application. So pretty neat stuff there. Okay, and then there's other features, but I just want to jump down to entities so I can kind of, let me see right here. So I could just explain that this is where the table is. So I have an actor table that has a bunch of actors in it, right? Star Trek actors, to be honest. And you just say the source is going to be this table name and the type is going to be table. Everything else is kind of built in. Then individually, I could say this table is available in Graph or not. And so I could remove it from the Graph schema. Same thing with REST, right? So it's really, really great. Let me show you what it looks like. So now that I have it, everyth's done by a CLI. It's the easiest way to do it. The CLI makes it so that you can integrate it with your CI/CD pipeline easily as well.
You use the data access builder to point to a database and it created that file? You didn't have to write that file, did you?
I totally had to write the file with the CLI. So from the CLI, in fact, let me jump over here and show you something real quick. So from the CLI, I'll scroll to the top, and here's a nice little starting place for Data API Builder. This is what I'm going to build out as far as the database, right? And so I go in and let me zoom in so everything's slightly bigger, but not too big, so you can see it. And so right here is the command line for me to say start by building it out. It stubs in everything for you, and then the command line allows you to make all the changes that you want. And I don't know, do you know Eric, who built the EF Power Tools extension in Visual Studio? He added the ability to right click on a database inside Visual Studio and create the entire set of CLI commands you would need to build out Data API Builder. It's incredible. There's a lot of that going around. Like, this is such a neat thing. A lot of MVPs are kind of warming up to it in a fast way. Like,
that's Eric Jensen. We've had him on the show repeatedly.
That's
Love
right.
him.
That's right. Yeah. So he's added that. You could right click a database project and just like immediately it's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
That's cool.
And so then, I mean, to be honest, a sophisticated configuration file might require 10, 11, 12 commands to get everything the way you want it to be. But the CLI is written so that you can do that. And it's really, really great, as well as all the relationships between tables as well. So just wanted to show that. Here's the syntax for adding a table, right? I can add an actor table. All you do is give basic permission to that table. You can add very sophisticated permission to every single entity, can be different. And they can also have expressions so that I can say things like, only when the ID is this, only when the claim is this, only when the item's ID matches the claim value, whatever makes sense to you, because not all developers have access to the database to be able to make those changes. So they can make the changes right here in the API and basically make the database look and act cooler than it really is. And so there's that's a big feature. Now, right now, you know that we're moving into Selenium. It's the next major semester here in the engineering world of Azure. And so we have tons of new features being put together that we're going to be working on for the next about 6 months. And so there's a lot of activity around Data API Builder, and we respond to a lot of the issues that are put on the repository because it's open source. And so the community is really involved. They helped us prioritize all the features we'll be working on. We accept pull requests from the community. It's pretty spectacular. Yeah. Okay, let me show you it working. So now that I have it, so this is the config file that I've got running. It is, and it has a handful of tables because you saw the whole diagram. And so I have it's a .NET tool. .NET. Let's see. How would I? Let's see. Right here. I would say .NET tools. Is this big enough? Let me make it a little bit bigger. .NET tools install Microsoft Data API Builder. Microsoft.data API builder, right? And I would make it a global. And I've already got it installed, so I don't need to run this. But that's how you would install it. It's just a .NET tool, runs cross-platform, doesn't require Windows or anything like that. In fact, our container is a Linux container, so everything executes there. By the way, under the hood, this is all written in .NET. It's an ASP.NET Core application, and it's version 8 right now. And so as we go to the different versions, we try and keep everything up to date as much as we can. So it's really neat. Anyway, dab start is the way you run it. Dab is the keyword. That's our driver. And so start looks for a configuration file that is named dab-config.json. If I named it something else, I could point it to it with a -c, but I know that I have it correctly named.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and execute it here. It's running now. That's all there is to it. And because it's in the development environment, I have Swagger now. I have data. I have Banana Cake Pop running, and everything is like the way you would want it to be. And it sets up both on HTTP and HTTPS. So let me go ahead and just open it up and show you what the endpoint looks like. It opened up on another window here. So just let me pull that down for you. There you go. All right. So this is the root. I'll just zoom in a little. This is the root endpoint. It just tells you that it's running. Healthy just means that it's a health endpoint. We're adding actually many health checks to this coming up soon.
Okay.
And I can go into Swagger. Let's see, where is Swagger? Swagger, just like this. SWAGGER. Swag, maybe it's API/Swagger. What's happening? Why am I not getting it? It's healthy. Did I disable? Hang on a second. This is not the way demos are supposed to go, my man.
Uh-oh.
Hang on. I just want to make
I
sure.
thought you enabled Swagger.
Yeah, this is
/API.
It can call the database. Where is SW? Did I spell it wrong? SWAGGER. Swagger. Swagger?
API / What if you just do API? What happens?
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's so easy how this works. It's so stupid that it's not coming up right now. Invalid entity Swagger is because it doesn't go under API. It goes under the root. But
no.
Okay, let's go to GraphQL. And all right, wait, something else is happening. Why is this happening to? Let me change it to see if the HTTP endpoint makes it any easier for me. Oh, this is not right. All right, let's close that and just start again. Huh. Well, this is a real situation for me all of a sudden. Let me start and see if I can just restart the system here. Restart and see if that makes a difference. For Pete's sake, do you think that I had this running 10 seconds before I started this call with you so I could do the demo? Oh, that is absolutely crazy. Well, they're both. Oh, wait. I think I know the problem. This is talk about user error. Okay, so one of the things we have is the ability to change the host mode from production to development. And so when you're in production, you would never want Swagger and you would never want anything like that. So development, there we go. Panic averted. I feel like things can actually work now. That's good.
So that's actually
all right. So let me
a great error to have received. It was an illustrative.
You know what? It's exactly the way I planned it, Rob.
Exactly.
All right, so let me pull it up again. Same situation. This time, if I go /Swagger, totally different experience. So nice.
All right.
Yay.
Woo.
Yeah, so I can go down to like the plain get here, and let me go down and execute it just so you can see the results come back. But this gives me an opportunity just to point some things out. We add to the get operation a whole bunch of extra keywords that give you capabilities you don't have to build in. So for example, one of them is you can set the role so that this is just saying for authentication purposes. But I can say $select equals, and I could say only name, only the ID or whatever. I could start projecting just the columns that I want, so I don't have to go and change anything inside my
So you're telling me at runtime I can just get a endless list of fields without having to change the API itself?
That's right. That's right.
That is so cool.
And check this out. I can make it so that only the IDs that are greater than 3. This GT is because it's going to end up inside the query string. I can set whatever the order by is. I can also do all built-in pagination as well. So in fact, if this is me saying I want the page, this specific page, but it automatically pages as well. So for example, let's say you have 5 million rows in your table and I do a get against it. I don't want to return 5 million rows. It automatically cuts it down to 100 and gives me a next link to go ahead and get the rest. And so I
Mm-hmm.
can easily build that into my application then, because it's just a standard way of doing it. And it uses cursor pagination, which means that if you have a very busy table that is constantly being inserted, you always are looking at a consistent page and you don't have things moving around underneath you. So really neat capabilities just kind of sitting there and making your life a little bit happier as well. So all of that, by the way, you get, I mean, all of it's for free, but it is for
That's
free in
cool.
the sense that it's just built in. You can't turn features off. You get all these features and you don't even have to turn them on, right? That's the
Mm-hmm.
whole idea. So in a lot of ways, the way that in the sense that I am attracted to GraphQL, I don't need to go to GraphQL for everything. I can go to REST because I give it so much capability here. And so if I were doing that from an endpoint, by the way, if I went API slash ACTOR, right? So here's the list of actors at Star in Star Trek for me. And if I did the same
Okay.
thing here, it would look like this: question mark, dollar sign, filter equals ID is greater than 3. And so just look here, DeForest Kelly is 3. And so
Yep.
when I run it, now I only get ID 456 and all the ones above it.
Right.
So it's just these little things. I can add it. I could then compound those, right, and put and wrap them in parentheses and all the things you would expect to be able to do as well. So really neat capabilities. But
Is
that's the
James,
REST side.
is James Doohan really 104 years old?
Were he alive? Yes, that he.
Wow.
Yeah, wait, 100. Gosh, it's weird to think like that,
1920?
isn't it? Yeah. Remember, they sent his ashes to the with the space shuttle.
Yeah. Okay.
That's like a dream come true. I would love that. That'd be great. All right, Open API. Let me just show you this real quick. So API slash Open API gets you to our Open API specification. This is us
Mm-hmm.
taking everything you described in your database in that configuration file and translating it into the Open API spec for you. And this is really valuable. I'm going to show you more about this in just a second, but let me just start by going to GraphQL and just showing something off. GraphQL, right? So this opens up Banana Cake Pop, which we use behind the scenes Hot Chocolate as the library that implements GraphQL. So it's really, really cool. And it's all standard. If you were building your own API that was going to have GraphQL resolvers, you would also use Hot Chocolate. That's
Okay.
because it's like the go-to library because of all of its functionality. It's kept up to date to the nanosecond. It is crazy. We can't even keep up with all the updates that it's doing. It's incredible. But let me create that. So this is the experience that you would have if you were doing some development testing against your GraphQL
Okay.
endpoint. And so this little green here tells you that it read the schema. So remember that GraphQL is special because it has this schema that exposes, that gives you IntelliSense and all of the features to explain what it can provide you. And so I can go in and create a query. And so I'll create a query. You have to give it a name. So I'll give it the name A. And I'll do exactly what we just did. So I'll say ID, name, and birth year, run it. And so it gives me the same, let me see here, ID name. Oh, sorry, I picked the wrong one. I picked ID by PK. So that's where I need to pass in only the ID. So let me go to actors and I'll go to not arguments, but items. That's columns basically. ID
Mm-hmm.
name and birth year. I'll run it again. No errors this time. If I
Okay.
were to make this just slightly smaller, you can kind of see there's built William Shatner, right? And what's cool that you can't do in a REST API, but you can do in a GraphQL API is this. Now I can say, tell me the name of the actors that he, or of the characters that he played, right? And so now I could run and I could see here's William
Ooh.
Shatner and he
Okay.
played James T. Kirk. And I
Mm-hmm.
could keep on going because now the actors, they relate to the series. All right, which series was that character in? So now I can go into the name of the series, run it again, and I can see that. If I can scroll a little to the right for you,
Ooh.
here's William Shatner played James T. Kirk in Star Trek, and it allows me to not talk to my API developer and say, hey, we also need to have the series. Hey, we also need to
Yeah.
have the actor, right? Instead, they just provide all of this, expose it through a schema, and I just write the query as complex as I need it to be. Pretty neat stuff. And all the relationships are right there built in. Each of the entities understands how the other entity works because I provided that in the configuration file, right?
So
And,
what
and
do
it
my clients look like? Let's say I'm building a front end, whether it's a web app or Maui or WPF
mm-hmm,
or whatever,
mm-hmm.
UWP. How do I call this stuff in the client app?
All right. So you mean how do I call the GraphQL stuff? Because this is a huge curiosity to a lot of people. Now
So
what's
let's
different?
back up. If I I could do
Yeah.
REST. So I would call this API the exact same way I would call any other REST API.
And pass the query with it, right? And it would
Okay.
return this JSON block. So at the simplest level, what you just said is absolutely correct. I
Okay.
call it like a regular HTTP query. Yes. I
Mm-hmm.
pass in this query, so it has that. Yes. And then I get back a JSON block. Yes, that's exactly right. However, it's pretty complex, right? Being able to get everything done just correctly, I would want to use some sort of a library to help me do it. The go-to library for .NET developers on the client side is called Strawberry Shake. And so I have Strawberry Shake calling my API that's run by Hot Chocolate that I've been debugging using Banana Cake Pop. This is the most delicious technology ever created.
And is
And
Strawberry Shake a NuGet package that I can just
it is.
install?
Yeah, it is.
All
It is.
right.
And you do all the stuff basically from a command line where you build out the endpoint, the query, it generates the classes so you can deserialize them and have strong types. And
Okay.
so the idea is, although it's very dynamic to be able to build my query for my UI, it's not so dynamic that every time I call it, it's going to be a different set of fields. It's just going to be different as I'm doing the developments, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
the idea. And so that way I can still build those resulting types and make them strongly typed for you, right? That's what Strawberry Shake is doing for you.
Strawberry
There's
Shake
there's a
NuGet.
couple of steps. Calling a REST endpoint is certainly easier than calling a GraphQL endpoint. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
talk about that's like a religious war statement that I made, but it is true. And so you just want to like have your mind wrapped around the value add that I get from graph is high enough for me to go over this speed bump of this like learning curve that I'm gonna have to endure. Once you have it though, it's pretty straightforward. That's for sure.
So
Let me,
Strawberry Shake is just for GraphQL?
Strawberry Shake is the .NET NuGet package for the client calling a GraphQL endpoint.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, yeah,
All
that's
right.
exactly right.
Cool.
And okay, so that's the GraphQL side. Let me show you something else that's unbelievably neat, and it's a feature that's built into the API builder that allows you to cache on the API side. Right, it's pretty cool, and it's invisible to you and
Mm-hmm.
me. So let me pull up the configuration file and show you that I have caching at the global level turned on right here. That doesn't mean anything is cached. That just allows for caching to work. Down here, when I look at I have this nice little view set up called a slow view. And the reason it's called a slow view is because it takes 5 seconds to execute inside SQL. But I've also, for it, turned on cache. It's actually false right now, but I'm just about to turn it on. And I'm going to show you what a single second of cache can do to an operation. It's going to blow your
Okay.
mind because if you talk to a normal developer, you're like, well, how long should we cache our data? They start really high. Oh, I don't know, an hour, a day, 3 hours, 60 minutes, whatever it is, right? And then you're like, well, what if you drag it all the way down to the smallest interval you can think of just a single second? What's the impact? So I have this tool. I don't know if you've ever seen Web Surge or not, but it's really great. And so I have this tool where I can go into the API. It's called /API/slow. That's the way to get to it. It's already running right now with cache turned off, right? And so let me go ahead and run it. It's going to take 5 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going to be the longest 5 seconds of our life. And then it returns a value of 5. So this doesn't do
Okay.
anything special. I just want you to see the operation takes 5 seconds. Now, Web Surge allows me to run a concurrent set of threads against it for a certain amount of time. So I'm going to run 200 threads against it for 15 seconds. So nice and quick. Let me go ahead and just start that. And we'll just let this is like a local load test against my endpoint. So I'll let this run. It'll run for 15 seconds no matter what. But what's going to happen is it's going to call. And if you think about it, a 5-second delay means in 15 seconds, at most, you can get 3. And so then we have all of these others running simultaneously. And so each one will be queued up. So I have 200 times 3, 600. Each one of those will hopefully be able to run. So here's the operation. I've got, on average, 12 requests per second. Now, remember, I had 200 lined up to run, but I couldn't get to 200. I could only get to 12. The average time that it ran right here at the top is 6 seconds, so a little bit longer than 5 seconds, partly because many of them had to queue up while they were waiting for the others to operate. This is what you would expect if you just had any sort of query that ran for a while and you had a very busy endpoint, right? So this is without any This is without any caching turned on. My solution, you and I would come up with, well, let's just make the container bigger. Let's make it so that we have more bandwidth. Let's ramp up that database so it can do more operate, whatever it is. We would think about the most expensive way to solve this problem, but let's solve it the cheapest way with in-memory cache. And so this is level 1 cache that's built in. And so let me pull up. So I'm going to take a quick screenshot. That's what I got right here, so I can remember what this looks like for later, because I want to show you. And so I'll go in here and I'll go down to the slow at the bottom here, right here where I have disabled cache. And so let me just change it to true. In order to make that work, I am going to stop and restart. So let me stop the dab start. So now that it's running, the only thing that is caching, by the way, is that endpoint. All the others don't have cache enabled. So I have this granular control over what's going to be cached and not cached. So now let me pull up Web Surge again. I'm not going to make any changes. I'll leave it at 215, and I'll go ahead and let that run for 15 seconds as it goes against it. And so you can kind of see behind the scenes the console output getting spit out by Data API Builder while this runs. And so let's go ahead. So 19 seconds, 10. And so it's absolutely phenomenal how this low-tech, low-cost, unbelievable solution, right? It is crazy. All right, so now let me just pull these down so we can compare, right? So I'll have this right here and this right here. So now the average when I have only a single second of cache. So think about that as far as stale data. Stale data is like when you call the data and it's out of date. No data is stale in 1 second. Now, maybe the stock market is stale in 1 second, but generally speaking, if you're working for a company, sometimes an entire day. So just think about 1 second is all you need to, like, there's no risk in adding it. And so now I have 133 requests per second instead of 12. I have a total of 15, let's call it 1,600 requests instead of 140.
Wow.
Right? Massive. Neither had any failures. However, get a load of this. If I look at the old one with no caching, the slowest endpoint is 5 seconds, 5,000 milliseconds. And so that's because there's no way to ever shorten the actual duration of the query. It's 5 seconds. The shortest query using cache is 0.3 seconds, right? So 33 milliseconds. That is insanely fast, which means some users, they get the entire payload. So like the worst got 7.6 seconds. The average person didn't even wait a second, but some people had the incredible, almost instantaneous experience just from adding a single second of cache, right? And so this is built into Data API Builder. It's also in a way built into ASP.NET Core. You can add in-memory caching, or like we did, you can add it with an external library called Fusion Cache that gives you the ability to add level 1 cache and level 2 cache, so you can cache out to like Redis or something along those lines as well if you don't want to have it inside the container. So pretty neat, right? I mean, for a 1 second of cache, causes no like negative impact. It's kind of nuts. All right, let me show you something else that's cool. I have OpenAPI here, OpenAPI. And so what can you do with OpenAPI? It's built into Visual Studio. I don't think a lot of developers even know this. So let me create a brand new project. Let's see, right here. A brand new project. I'll make it a simple console application. We'll just call it console app 1. And nothing special here. This will be an ordinary sort of project that you would do. So now let's say I want to call that endpoint, and I want to make it so that I can interact with it in, let's just say, the most straight way possible. So I've got some code over here to the side. So let me just go ahead and grab it and show you what I'm going to do. So using Newtonsoft. Man, who doesn't use Newtonsoft? But some don't, by the way, which is totally all right. And I have, let me see, I need to install Newtonsoft JSON, find the latest. It's a pretty cool feature of Visual Studio. And so when I call my endpoint, let me go back to it real quick. I'm going to copy this JSON that it output, and I'm going to ask to paste it in as JSON. I bet you've seen this trick before, right? Where you can say paste special, and it pastes only so it translates the JSON and infers what all the types are as well. So now I can go up here and I can say this fruit object is going to be deserialized. So let me just walk you through these lines of code. This is what everybody would do. And so this is before we get to the OpenAPI side of things. So all I'm doing is creating a very simple HTTP client. I'm calling getStringAsync. I'm passing in the endpoint that we just did. And then I deserialize that to actors and just loop through it, right? So if I run this, hopefully, I'll bet it'll open up here. Yes. All right. So, all right. It just spits them all out just the way you would expect, right? So that's nice. All right, get a load of this. This is so nice. So let me delete all of this so we can just do this again from scratch. If I right click my console here and I say add, and I come down to a connected service. So you almost always get the connected service window when you create a brand new project. We just all close it. Right, instead of reading it, right? It kind of looks like this. Sometimes there's little icons depending on the type that you have. Like if it's a web a web API application, you'd have little icons. However, if I go down here and click a service reference, there are three things I can connect to, and the first one is OpenAPI. So if I select OpenAPI and I say it's from a URL, let me grab that URL. I have it over here, and paste that in. Right now, I can say I won't change anything, just so we can kind of you can make it much prettier than it finally ends up. But once I have it, so it adds this folder called OpenAPIs where it has downloaded the OpenAPI JSON file so it's not always calling to the live one. So if there are changes, and more importantly, now I have new classes inside my project where I can say var OpenAPI equals OpenAPI client, right? And new, of course.
Okay.
New OpenAPI client. Now, this is cool because all of the operations, that means every get, put, post, and all the other operation or delete that you would have to write against it and make sure that they are serialized properly and deserialized properly, now are all completed, and they all obey what are output through the OpenAPI specification. So if I create var HTTP equals new HTTP client, right? And so now that is the only thing that OpenAPI is asking for. Now I can say I have to do one more thing. I have to give it the URL. Base URI equals. What is the base URI? I think I still have it in my. Let's see. Right there. There we go. I'll take away the OpenAPI part. All right. So that's the base API, the base URL for all the REST APIs. So now I could just as easily say var actors equals await client dot OpenAPI. The OpenAPI dot actor get async. There we go.
Ooh.
Now, and it's all built for me. Now, remember, all the extra capabilities in the REST are also exposed here as well. So you can see in the signature, here's that authentication role, the authorization type, what the filter string, the select string, the order by, all of those are here because they're all part of that OpenAPI specification.
Cool.
I can't just dodge them. Yeah, it's insane. So let me add them real quick. I don't have to. I can just say default. All right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think. Is that right? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So now, yeah, I can take that. That's great. So in actors, and actors has a value output, and then actor.name. Okay, so this is it. It'll output each one of them together. So just as a reminder, what that value is, if I scroll up to the top, there's everything is inside an array, and that has a named array of value. So this is a standard way of outputting multiple sets of data. And so that's what I'm doing with value right here, because value now is a property. I don't have to use it like a string, like I'm trying to access JSON or anything like that. It's all been deserialized, and and so if I run it now, it's going to run. It'll be exactly the same, right? Just spits all of those out. And it's a beautiful way of having all the pieces together. And if I need to do some sort of update, or if I have to delete it, all of those operations are now inside this OpenAPI client that was created automatically for me by Visual Studio. What do you think of that?
I think this is amazing. So I have a database sitting in Azure, and I wrote an API for it a while ago. I call it from a Maui app. I don't really like the API. I want to redo it. It's kind of old. So I could just use the dab to rebuild that middle layer, stick it up in Azure, and then use code like this to call it from the client. I don't have to I don't have to learn more about Entity Framework Core. I don't have to write the code in the service. I just generate it and deploy it to Azure, and I'm ready to go.
You caught the vision. Insane. Just like that. Just like that, you caught the vision. It's crazy, right? I mean, why? Wow. Because most of the time, it's just those crazy CRUD operations that we don't care all that much about. And it's I mean, this is it. It's really nice. And listen, I know earlier I said I wasn't going to show any more PowerPoint, but I have to just show this really quick. There is the easy implementation of really sophisticated architecture, right? So if you have a microservices architecture, it's no big deal. You just
Hmm.
add another one, right? And because these are just tiny little containers, and I mean tiny little containers, you just add as many as you need, pointing to all of those. Each one of them can make it so your proof of concept for your microservices application can be done by lunch. It's sort of insane. And if you decide that you have this gigantic database, but you want to separate the operations, maybe you have like CRQS, so you have a read and a write separated.
Yep.
That's totally cool. You can do that this way, or you can maybe that top one is the executive, and so you want to ramp that up to be a really big container. No big deal. You can do that as well, right? And so that's the sort of idea where I can make it so that. Here's another one. You'll like this a lot. So now I can also make it so that a single API points to two databases, 3 or 4, any number of databases. We support as many as you want. And that means one API surface that you create that does all the CRUD operations against every database in your enterprise. So maybe you have 4, maybe
Hmm.
an exaggeration, but maybe you have 2, right? And you're like, man, I wish these were together. And you can make them look together with a single API. Just wrapped together with Data API Builder, and so and this will blow your mind because it blew mine when we added it. Is I can do the exact same thing except for some of the databases can be on prem and some of the databases can be up in Azure. But the API
Okay.
returns all of them as a single result set. So if I make a GraphQL call, for example, that GraphQL call calls to Cosmos in Azure with NoSQL and SQL Server on prem at the same time, bringing back one result set for me so that
Oh,
it
wow.
looks, now I've mixed together not only on-prem and cloud data, but I've also mixed together relational data and NoSQL data all at the same time. So you and I are thinking, gosh, this is so simple. We would just do the simple thing. But if you're like, I have a complex set of requirements, we probably match those two. Like that's what's really insane about it. It's just it's just a neat little tool. The fact that it's free is sort of insane.
Yeah.
The fact that we give you the source code, you could it's nugetized. You could even put it in your application if you don't want to run it inside a container. It's just
Hmm.
options after options. And I'll tell you what, it is insanely popular right now. Like when I go to conference after conference trying to present this, that's where you and I just saw each other at VS Live,
Yeah.
and this is what I was talking about. I'm like, get a load of this, and everybody they never believe it, right? They're always like, what's the catch? Only works in Azure? No, only works with SQL Server? No, no, no. There's some sort of cost built in? No, no. It's crazy, right? You're like, oh, what's the compromise? Well, the compromise is I don't know. I can't think of the compromise. There's got to be one somewhere. But it's really a great tool. It's really a great
So,
tool.
in terms of uh, demos, tutorials, samples, is there good learning uh, resources if I want to start playing around with this
Yeah,
and I actually want to build an API that talks to a database and then call it from my client?
yeah, no doubt about it. The place that I would start would probably be AKMS just dab. That
Okay.
takes you to the repository, and from there it can give you everything else. Here's a formal set of resources that you might be interested in. You could go straight to the repo, or you could go to documentation from here, dab/docs. You could
Hmm.
go to our registry if you want to pull down the container and you want to see the information about that as well. And we've got a whole bunch of samples built out as well. The
Okay.
documentation is insanely good. We spent months rewriting we built the documentation as we built the application, and like many sets of documentation it was sort of makeshift as a result, and we scrapped everything and rebuilt it again just ground up. And it is documentation that you dream of. It walks you through everything step by step. It's super
Okay.
clear. It's really it's really something else. And so this is, if I were a normal developer wanting to be introduced to Dab, I would start right here. Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Cool. This is really cool
I told
stuff.
you it was neat, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to play around with
Crazy
this.
craziness.
And if,
Yeah, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, Mac, Windows.
all
There's
right. So
either way you want to
if
do it
people play
works.
around with this and they have issues to report or suggestions or comments, are you
Yeah, and
on
if you
developer
do, you
community?
can head
No,
to
you're
our
not on developer
repository.
community, right?
Nope,
Okay.
nope, we're not. We're right there on GitHub. Just drop an issue right into the repository directly, and we
Okay.
monitor that. and we take care of things as quickly as we possibly can. This went GA in May, so we've been GA for almost 6 months now, and we've spent basically that window of time not adding features, only responding to issues to all of our early adopters. As a result, everything just slowly gets more and more and more and more stable. It's really, really great. There's a lot of little edge cases that customers surprise us with that we didn't expect for them to ask for, and so there you go. So we're just trying to make all of those things work. Now we're turning our attention to feature production. So building out as much cool stuff as we possibly can.
All right.
Hey, by the way, I know that you know about Aspire, but Data API Builder will be a regular component inside Aspire in just a handful of periods of time. It's right around the corner. Cool. I was just looking at the prototype syntax this morning, and it's terrific.
Nice. All right. This has been awesome. This was well worth a very long wait.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. All right. That's great. Let's not make it so much longer till next time for sure.
No. I think we're going to do some follow-ups here.
Yeah, very nice.
Maybe we'll do some.
I want to hear about your migration to Dab from whatever it is you're using.
Yeah.
We have, by the way, there's native integration into static web apps. So if this happens to be a static web app that you're using, you don't even have to host a container there. You just give them your connection string, you give them the configuration file with the connection string, and they host the container for you behind the scenes.
Yep, I have a Maui app. It used to be a Xamarin app. Now it's a Maui app. Okay. It talks to a normal REST API sitting in Azure, and then it talks to a SQL database in Azure. Nice. And the database is fine. The UI, I'm always happy to learn new UI tricks. One of these days I need to rewrite the UI anyway. And then I did want to rewrite the service. I think you should rewrite things to learn new things.
You should. I mean,
that's my motto.
It's a learning mindset.
Yeah, learning mindset. So I wanted to rewrite it anyway. So this will be awesome. I'm definitely going to try it.
Cool.
All right.
By the way, if you're using views or tables or store procedures, we support all three of them. So whatever you've got going on at SQL, we probably have that covered.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks for coming on and showing this to us. This is very exciting. And
Thank you, Rob.
We'll have in the show notes all these resources that you've listed. So send me your slides, please. And
I'll do that.
Hope you guys enjoyed that. We will see you next time on Visual Studio Toolbox.